I'm joined now by former Prime Minister Paul Martin. Welcome to CPAC.
Good to be here.
You tried in your time to shepherd some serious changes for Aboriginal people with the Kelowna Accord. When you see what's happening now at this convention with the policies focused on Indigenous issues, what do you think about?
Well, I think, first of all, because the Conservative government didn't honor the Accord, we lost a decade. However, the fact is that while it's late, the fact that it's very obvious that the Liberal government has taken this in hand. If you listen to Carolyn Bennett, you listen to Prime Minister Trudeau, it's very clear that the objectives that we had in the Kelowna Accord are the objectives of the government and that they're going to meet them.
Do you feel regret because you ran out of time on your initiative?
Oh, I feel enormous regret because I just think about what the Kelowna Accord had, was a kid who was going into grade 6, that student would now be going into grade 9. And the change in their primary school that the Kelowna Accord had gone through would have been enormous. And you worry about young people. That's what it's really all about.
The Aboriginal population in Canada is young, as you say. That the average age of the Indigenous Canadians is 26. It's 40 for the rest of us. They have the highest fertility rate, the highest growth rate, the highest potential for a young economic workforce. Right. To what extent does that demographic itself portend change, no matter what policies are implemented by government?
Oh, it absolutely. I mean, it's going to dictate change. But if you look at what you have just said, and then to hear that previous governments have said we can't afford to educate the youngest and fastest growing segment of our population, makes absolutely no sense. That's why education is certainly the area that I put all of my efforts into.
Aboriginal people have a very high participation rate with local politics, band politics, not the federal scene. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's changing. I think if you look in the last election, the First Nations vote, the 18 Métis vote, and Inuit vote was higher than it's ever been. And in fact, for the first time, the Grand Chief actually went out and campaigned on the need to vote. I think that one of the reasons you see a larger number of Indigenous members of Parliament is that. So yes, I think a lot of it is because in some cases they don't want to concede that they are governed by Ottawa, but in most cases, I think it's just that they only got the vote, in 1960? And think about what we have done, but that's changing. It's really changing.
One of the policy resolutions here is that every third person to be appointed Governor General ought to be Indigenous. What do you think about that?
Well, I think I think that'll be debated. I certainly do think that the time is coming when we need an Aboriginal Governor General. Whether you're going to impose quotas is something that remains to be debated.
Sounds like you don't agree with a quota on it.
No, it sounds like the delegates here are going to debate it. And I really don't think I want to be interfering in their debate.
Can you think of any people who ought to be Governor General?
Oh, sure. I can think of a list as long as you
Tell us some names.
Well, I'm not going to, because I'm not going to participate in it, but I know a number who would make tremendous Governors General.
What do you think, or do you see any ironies in an Indigenous person occupying the role that was essentially set up as a colonial overseer?
I think in the role of simply representing the Queen. Yes, I don't know what King George would have thought about that.
But they have traditionally had a lot of Canadians don't know, a very strong relationship with the Crown.
Well, they do.
More so than the rest of us. Why?
Absolutely, because of the proclamation, 300 years ago, where in fact, all of their rights, they claim, not their rights, the inherent right, but all their rights vis-a-vis the Crown came from a statement by King George in 1763. And they would go back to that all the time. They have a much better grasp of Canadian history than most of us have.
So here's the thing, expectations are so high now. What if nothing changes?
Things are going to change, and they're going to change fundamentally. They're going to change because it is the government's will. The government has made it very, very clear. Carolyn Bennett talked about it again today. Prime Minister Trudeau has talked about it. But it's also going to change because if you look at the demographics that you just referred to, it's got to change. This country cannot live with the youngest and fastest growing segment of its population not being well educated, not having decent health care, basically having inadequate child welfare. We're not going to build a country that way. What we really need to do is strengthen the partnership between us. If we do, 34 million people, nobody's going to touch us. If we don't, we're competing with countries with hundreds of millions of people.
Prime Minister Paul Martin, thanks for this conversation.
Thank you.